What if I told you that for the biggest football stars on earth, the final whistle is only the beginning? Because once the crowd goes home, once the cameras shut off, and once the stadium lights fade, another world takes over, a world of private terminals, custom cabins, long-range business jets, luxury interiors, and aircraft built to move football royalty across continents in total privacy. For modern football icons, a private jet is not just a toy. It is time-saved. It is privacy protected. It is comfort controlled. It is recovery in the air. And in some cases, it is a flying statement that says success has lifted them into a completely different orbit. Some of these aircraft are sleek and understated. Some are personalized and impossible to ignore. Some are built for family comfort. Others are built for range, speed, and prestige. And today, we are stepping inside that world. This is 10 private jets owned by famous football players inside their luxury fleets. Let's get into it. Number 10, Samuel Eto'o Bombardier Challenger 604. At number 10, we begin with a football legend whose career always felt larger than a single club, a single country, or even a single era. Samuel Eto'o is one of the most decorated strikers the sport has ever produced, and the aircraft most often linked to him is the Bombardier Challenger 604, a large cabin business jet that multiple football and luxury aviation reports place in the $6 to $7 million range on the secondary market. That model remains active in business aviation today and is still widely recognized as a serious executive jet rather than a novelty purchase. And that is exactly why it suits Eto'o. Because the Challenger 604 is not the kind of aircraft you choose just to show off. It is the kind of aircraft you choose when your life has already moved beyond the stage where visibility alone matters. This is a jet built for comfort, credibility, and real-world movement. It has the kind of cabin space that feels substantial the moment you step inside, and it projects the image of a man whose life is no longer built around short trips and attention-grabbing luxury moments. It feels executive, mature, established. That matters in football. A lot of people think private jets are just about glamour, but for stars at Eto'o's level, a serious business jet becomes something else entirely. It becomes a tool for protecting time, energy, and privacy. That is especially important when a player's career, business interests, family life, and international commitments pull them constantly across borders. So when you picture Eto'o with a Challenger 604, you are not just picturing wealth, you are picturing arrival. Not arrival at the stadium, arrival at a different level of life. And that is why he opens the countdown. Number 9, Sergio Ramos Cessna Citation 560. At number 9, we get a player whose image has always mixed aggression, polish, control, and a very deliberate sense of personal style. Sergio Ramos is widely reported to own a Cessna Citation 560, with multiple British and football lifestyle reports linking him to the aircraft after a purchase around 2020, valued at roughly 1.7 million pounds. The Citation 560 remains an active and highly recognizable light business jet family, and in Ramos's case, it has frequently been framed as a practical private aircraft for travel between Spain, France, and elsewhere in Europe. What makes that jet so interesting is that it tells you a lot about Ramos immediately. Because the Citation 560 is not absurdly oversized. It is not trying to dominate the runway by sheer scale. Instead, it feels tactical, efficient, sharp, fast enough to matter, comfortable enough to justify itself, and compact enough to feel like a deliberate choice rather than a theatrical one. That is why it fits him. A player like Ramos never built his career around looking casual. Everything about his image has always felt intentional. The defending, the leadership, the attitude, the style, the way he carries himself in public. A Citation 560 follows that same logic. It says the owner values movement, privacy, flexibility, and speed, but does not need a flying palace to make the point. And in a strange way, that makes the jet more believable. It feels like the aircraft of a footballer who actually uses it rather than merely poses beside it. The size, the mission, and the profile all line up with a player whose life has moved between elite clubs, major cities, family logistics, sponsorship obligations, and a constant need to control his own time. That is why Ramos earns this spot, because his jet does not just look luxurious. It looks efficient in the way a high-level football life actually demands. Number 8. Gareth Bale, Cessna Citation XLS+. At number 8, we move to a player whose public image always felt a little different from many of his superstar peers. Gareth Bale has long been associated in football luxury and private aviation roundups with the Cessna Citation XLS+, a mid-sized business jet often cited around the $13 million mark when new. Other business jet pricing references commonly place used or older market values much lower depending on year and condition, but the model itself remains very active and widely respected today. Reports in football private jet lists repeatedly link Bale to this aircraft as a logical fit for European travel and private mobility. And honestly, the Citation XLS Plus makes a lot of sense for Gareth Bale, because Bale's public persona, even at the peak of his fame, often felt more private and more insulated than many other football superstars. He was never the most openly theatrical figure in the room. He often seemed more comfortable escaping pressure than feeding it, and the Citation XLS Plus reflects that perfectly. This is not a ridiculous megajet. It is not a cartoonishly large symbol of excess. It is a smart, polished, highly capable business aircraft. That distinction matters. The XLS Plus is known in aviation circles for being one of those jets that gets the balance right. It offers real comfort, real speed, and real mission flexibility without becoming clumsy. It is elegant without needing to shout. That makes it exactly the kind of airplane that a player like Bale might gravitate toward, a jet that upgrades every aspect of travel while still feeling controlled and professional rather than performative. That is why Bale's aircraft story works so well. It feels believable. Not in the sense that it is modest, because it obviously is not modest, but in the sense that it matches the emotional texture of his public life. It is the jet of someone who wants quality and speed, but not circus-level visibility. And in a world where a lot of football private jets are remembered because they are loud, Gareth Bale's becomes memorable because it feels like quiet luxury done properly. Number 7. Wayne Rooney, Dassault Falcon 900 Luxes. At number 7, we get a football name that still feels deeply tied to the image of English football at its most intense, most high-pressure, and most globally visible. Wayne Rooney has long been linked to the Dassault Falcon 900 Luxes, and that aircraft tells you immediately that this is not just a story about private travel, it is a story about scale. Reports connecting Rooney to the Falcon 900 Luxes commonly place the aircraft somewhere in the high teens to low 20s million dollar range, depending on configuration, year, and market reference, while the type itself remains very much active and respected in the long-range business jet world. And that matters because the Falcon 900 Luxes is not a lightweight step into private aviation. It is a large cabin trijet, the kind of aircraft that feels serious the moment you mention it. It has the size, the range, and the executive presence to instantly separate itself from smaller, mid-sized jets. This is not the airplane of someone who only wants to skip airport lines. This is the airplane of someone whose life, family, obligations, and status all demand a much larger circle of comfort and capability. That is why the Rooney pairing works so well. Because Rooney was never a small football figure. His career moved from teenage phenomenon to Manchester United icon, England captain, global celebrity, and then on into management and public life. A jet like the Falcon 900 Luxes fits that arc perfectly. It feels like the aircraft of someone who no longer thinks in terms of quick upgrades or flashy purchases. It feels like a machine chosen by someone who has fully crossed into long-range executive travel. And there is another reason it fits him. The Falcon 900 Luxes is a trijet, and that gives it something very few private jets have anymore, a slightly old-school sense of authority. It feels heavy in the right way, established, serious. Less like an influencer's toy and more like an executive tool with real legacy behind it. That is why Rooney lands here. Because his jet story is not about novelty. It is about scale, permanence, and arrival. And that is a very different kind of luxury. Number 6. David Beckham, Bombardier Challenger 350. At number 6, we arrive at one of the most marketable football figures the sport has ever produced. David Beckham and private aviation have been linked for years, and the aircraft most consistently connected to him in modern reporting is the Bombardier Challenger 350. Depending on the report, the jet is often valued somewhere between $21 million and $26.6 million, with some stories framing it as a super mid-size business jet that reflects Beckham's post-playing life as a football executive, global brand figure, and ultra-mobile celebrity. And the Challenger 350 makes perfect sense for Beckham, because the Challenger 350 is one of those aircraft that feels expensive without looking excessive. It is polished, modern, clean, highly respected inside business aviation. It gives the owner real performance and real cabin comfort, but it does not need to become the largest aircraft on the ramp to make its point. In many ways, that is exactly the kind of private jet that fits Beckham's entire public identity. He has never been just rich. He has always been curated, measured, precise. His image has long depended on taste as much as visibility, and the Challenger 350 is a jet built around that exact balance. That is why this pairing works so well. The Beckham jet story is not about a giant flying palace. It is about refinement. The aircraft feels like something chosen by someone who understands how brand, style, and function can reinforce each other at the highest level. It is a serious business jet, but it is also a very elegant one. That distinction matters because in the world of celebrity aviation, the right aircraft does not just move the owner. It says something about how the owner sees himself and how he wants the world to see him. For Beckham, the Challenger 350 says exactly the right things. It says global. It says polished. It says successful without needing to scream. And in a category where some stars go louder, that kind of controlled luxury may actually hit harder. Number 5, Zlatan Ibrahimović, Cessna Citation Longitude. At number 5, subtlety leaves the room. Because if there is one football figure whose aircraft should feel powerful, polished, and a little larger than life, it is Zlatan Ibrahimović. Multiple private jet and football luxury reports link Zlatan to the Cessna Citation Longitude, usually valuing the aircraft somewhere in the mid to high $20 million range, with common public estimates landing around $26 million or roughly €27 to €30 million, depending on source and currency. The Longitude itself remains one of the most modern and desirable super mid-size business jets in its class, which makes it a very believable fit for a player whose public persona has always leaned into command, scale, and theatrical confidence. And honestly, the Citation Longitude feels almost too perfect for Zlatan. This is not a tiny entry-level private jet. It is not understated. It is not trying to quietly disappear into executive anonymity. It is long-range, polished, sharp, spacious, and undeniably premium. The kind of aircraft that tells you the person boarding it expects the journey to feel controlled from the first minute to the last. That is exactly the emotional language Zlatan has always spoken in public. His whole career has been built around occupying more space than everyone else in the conversation. More presence, more personality, more certainty. The Longitude fits that beautifully. It is not the biggest business jet in the world, but it does not need to be. What it offers is something more specific, modern prestige with real performance, and enough cabin credibility to feel elite without tipping over into absurdity. It is the kind of airplane that lets a football icon travel privately without feeling like he chose a compromise anywhere along the way. That is why Zlatan lands in the top 5. Because this pairing feels like identity in aircraft form. A jet that is sleek, expensive, very capable, and impossible to separate from the personality of the man linked to it. And in a list like this, that kind of match matters. Number 4, Karim Benzema, Gulfstream G200. At number 4, we get a player whose career, especially in its later years, has come to represent something bigger than football alone. Karim Benzema is not just a striker. He is a luxury-era football figure. And the jet most often linked to him in recent lifestyle coverage is the Gulfstream G200. That is an interesting aircraft choice because the G200 sits in a very specific place in private aviation. It is not the newest Gulfstream in the sky, and it is not the biggest, but the brand name alone changes the emotional tone immediately. A Gulfstream tells people something before the aircraft even leaves the ramp. It says the person on board has crossed out of celebrity convenience and into a more executive, more structurally luxurious world. Recent reporting has linked Benzema to a G200 valued around €5 million, depending on market condition and configuration. And that fits Benzema more than people might realize. Because Benzema's modern image has become deeply tied to elegance, fashion, polished luxury, and a kind of calm wealth that does not need to shout all the time. The G200 reflects that. It is not trying to be theatrical, it is trying to be legitimate. It feels like the aircraft of someone who wants real private jet utility, real comfort, and the badge of one of the most prestigious names in business aviation, but does not necessarily need to turn the jet itself into a spectacle. That is why Benzema lands this high. Because his jet story is not about novelty, it is about transition. A player moving from elite football legend to a wider luxury identity. A man whose life is no longer just about training grounds and stadiums, but about influence, style, family, and status on a much larger stage. And in that world, a Gulfstream makes perfect sense. Number 3, Neymar Jr., Cessna Citation Sovereign. At number 3, we get a football superstar whose lifestyle has never looked small. Because Neymar Jr. has always lived in a world where football, celebrity, fashion, luxury, and spectacle all blend into one giant public image. And that is exactly why the jet most often linked to him makes so much sense. Instead of repeating one of the larger long-range jets already in this countdown, the better fit here is the Cessna Citation Sovereign, also known as the Citation 680. Over the years, Neymar has repeatedly been associated with this aircraft in celebrity aviation coverage, and it is a very interesting choice because it sits right in that sweet spot between comfort, speed, and practicality. Depending on year, configuration, and market condition, the Citation Sovereign can sit anywhere from the mid-single-digit millions on the used market to much higher lifestyle media valuations when framed as part of a celebrity fleet. And that is what makes this jet work so well for Neymar. Because the Citation Sovereign is not tiny, and it is definitely not modest, but it is also not trying to be the biggest thing on the runway. It feels like the kind of jet a football superstar would actually use, often fast enough to matter, polished enough to feel elite, and spacious enough to deliver real comfort without becoming a flying palace for the sake of ego alone. That matters a lot for someone like Neymar. His life has never been built around only one city or one role. He moves between football, endorsements, events, family travel, media appearances, and a level of public attention that almost never shuts off. A jet like the Citation Sovereign fits that kind of life perfectly. It gives him private mobility without feeling oversized, and it carries exactly the kind of premium image you would expect from a player who has always lived at the intersection of sport and celebrity. And there is another reason this aircraft fits him so well. The Citation Sovereign has the right emotional balance. It feels luxurious. It feels serious. It feels expensive. But it still feels usable. That is important because Neymar's jet story works best when it feels like more than just showmanship. Yes, he is a global star. Yes, he is surrounded by luxury. But the best private jet for that kind of life is not always the one that looks the loudest. Sometimes it is the one that feels most naturally embedded into the rhythm of constant movement. And that is exactly what the Citation Sovereign does. It gives Neymar a private jet that feels premium without feeling excessive, recognizable without being repetitive, and glamorous without drifting too far away from real business jet logic. That is why Neymar belongs this high on the list. Because this is not just a footballer with a jet. This is a footballer whose jet actually matches the speed, visibility, and non-stop motion of the life he lives. Number 2, Lionel Messi, Gulfstream V. At number 2, we reach the footballer whose private jet may be the most instantly recognizable of them all. Lionel Messi is most commonly linked in aviation and celebrity travel coverage to a Gulfstream V, often described at roughly $15 million. And what makes that aircraft unforgettable is not just the airframe itself, it is the personalization, the number 10, the family details, the staircase design that turned the aircraft into something much more than a transportation tool. Over time, the Messi jet has become part of his myth in a way very few footballer aircraft ever do. That is why Messi lands here instead of lower. Because his jet is not just luxurious, it is iconic. A lot of players are reported to own or use private aircraft, but only a handful have a jet that the public can almost picture immediately. Messi's is one of those. It has crossed over from aviation detail into sports luxury folklore. Even people who do not care deeply about business jets often recognize the story of Messi's aircraft because it feels so specifically his. Family-oriented, globally mobile, highly personalized, and quietly elite at the same time. And then there is the aircraft itself. The Gulfstream V is no toy. It is a long-range business jet with the kind of real intercontinental capability that fits a player whose life has always existed across multiple football capitals, multiple markets, and multiple layers of fame. This is not merely a nice way to travel. It is a machine built for a life that has already outgrown ordinary geography. That is what makes the Messi jet story so powerful. It feels personal. It feels global. And somehow, it still feels human, which is a very rare combination for an aircraft story at this level of wealth. Number 1. Cristiano Ronaldo, Gulfstream G650. And now we arrive at number 1. Because if any footballer belongs at the top of a list like this, it is Cristiano Ronaldo. Ronaldo's private aviation story has been linked to more than one aircraft over the years, but the model most commonly highlighted in modern luxury coverage is the Gulfstream G650, often valued in the $65 million to $75 million range. Multiple recent lifestyle and aviation reports describe the G650 as the aircraft that best represents the scale of Ronaldo's current private jet image. Ultra-long range, ultra-elite, and unmistakably top tier. And that is exactly why he wins. Because the G650 is not just expensive, it is symbolic. This is one of the most desirable business jets in the world, the kind of aircraft that sits right on the edge where executive travel becomes something larger than function. Huge range, very high speed, major prestige, and enough brand power that the aircraft's name alone already says something about the person using it. And for Ronaldo, that fits perfectly. He is not simply a footballer anymore. He is a global commercial force, a luxury figure, a family brand, a social media empire, and one of the most recognizable athletes in history. A smaller jet would still be luxurious. A good jet would still make sense. But the G650 feels like the aircraft of someone who has no interest in doing anything halfway. That is why the Ronaldo aircraft story feels so definitive. This is not just about moving privately. It is about moving at the very top end of private aviation culture. And that is what makes him number 1. Because when you combine football superstardom, relentless personal branding, and one of the most prestigious jets on the planet, you get something bigger than transport. You get a flying symbol of football wealth at its highest tier. So there you have it, 10 private jets owned by famous football players, and the luxury fleets that reveal just how big football superstardom has become in the sky. From Samuel Eto'o's executive-style Challenger 604 to Sergio Ramos's tactical Citation 560, Bale's polished Citation XLS+, Rooney's commanding Falcon 900 Luxes, Beckham's elegant Challenger 350, Zlatan's bold Citation Longitude, Benzema's prestigious Gulfstream G200, Neymar's high-drama Falcon 900 Luxes, Messi's iconic Gulfstream V, and Ronaldo's headline-level Gulfstream G650. One thing becomes obvious. For the biggest football stars on Earth, the private jet is no longer just a luxury extra. It is identity. It is time. It is privacy. It is status. And in some cases, it is a flying extension of the personal brand itself. Now I want to hear from you. Which footballer on this list has the best jet? And if you could pick just one aircraft from this countdown, which one would you want to fly first? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Unbox the World, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Because we have a lot more celebrity jets, billionaire aircraft, and private aviation stories coming your way.